So what's going on, guys, out in Revolution Land? You guys are going to watch this probably in the next day or so. Incidentally, if you guys have missed me on social media, sorry, I've been taking a 1 week break from social media, but I'll be back, of course, probably by the weekend. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce a really cool guy, Michael Young, founder of UNDONE Watches. How are you, sir?
Very good, thank you.
And, UNDONE Watches is one of these brands that suddenly has kind of burst into everyone's sort of conscious. You're making some amazing kind of vintage themed watches, but with a great deal of imagination, with some amazing designs, and at a price to quality differential that's almost hard to believe, Mm-hmm. So we just wanted to invite you here to discuss with us a little bit about your roots in watches, what your passions are in specific types of watches, and how you came about creating UNDONE.
Okay, I'll tell you a whole story now. So basically, I'm a watch collector myself. I started collecting when I was very small. So I was like 12 years old when I actually had a Rolex bubble back on my hand. That was from my cousin. And I was immediately hooked because I like all things mechanical. I like to collect mechanical toys and stuff. I don't like static stuff. So that's something, watch, wow, it's so intricate with all these parts. So I started collecting watches, vintage watches. And then Rolex is my passion. So I've ever since been collecting Rolexes. So I have a lot in my collection. Luckily, I started early. Things were cheap. I picked up Submariner during my college days in Australia for like $500. Amazing. And I think now it's a very limited edition. Now it's kind of like at least worth 100,000 US.
Right.
And
how do you feel as a Rolex collector about the way prices have escalated so rapidly, especially over the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years?
Yeah, I think technically it's because of the internet. Because in my days of collecting watches, they were called old watches or secondhand watches. There was no vintage watch market. Basically, what happened was because a lot of Rolex watches, they use a lot of different parts from different suppliers that makes subtle differences in the watches, and internet kind of blows this up. So in a certain model, there can be 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different dials, and they call them Mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. That was not designed by the brand. It was simply a switch of suppliers or switch of batches of production. But that makes people go crazy. In 1967, it must have this dial, and then you can swap things around. And I think internet helped fuel this interest a lot, and it created a lot of content. I think what happens is in some vintage watches, if there are no changes, there's nothing to talk about. You talk about one watch, it stays for 30 years. But in a brand like Rolexes, because you never knew what they did, what batches of dials they had. So that creates a lot of hype between collectors, and because the brand never steps up and say, no, this story is incorrect. They never say anything. So these collectors say, oh, I'm an expert, you're an expert, you all compare expert opinions. So that's, I think, the very early days of building hype on the brand. And I think Rolex didn't actually design it in that system, but naturally, because the way they do production created this kind of differences.
Well, it was also probably brought together by, let's say, an online community, probably an Italian community first, collecting community, and then an online community second, which really enjoyed this body of knowledge, but also by virtue of this body of knowledge started to escalate the prices of these watches quite a bit as well.
Exactly. And people are now looking for a specific model in a specific year and a specific configuration, and that could double. And purely having a warranty paper would again double that price. The investment side actually got a lot of people, a lot of investment bankers interested, because that's kind of like part of their job. They like buying things that they make money off. So the hobby then suddenly becomes part investment, part hobby.
That's interesting. Because it's funny. I went to a wedding, and the guy who was getting married was the head of one of the biggest hedge funds at one point. And I was
Yeah,
trying to figure out why was it all the guys that were there were so obsessed by vintage Rolex, specifically Daytonas, and in particular the exotic dial / Paul Newman Daytonas as well.
yes.
And they were all talking about them, and I was actually quite impressed because they seemed to have learned about them. But now I understand it's because also it's one of those sort of few genres where you can fuel a huge amount of increase in value by picking the right watch.
Exactly. And it's the cheapest hobby that you can find, collecting Rolexes. Because if you're into sports model, basically you can't buy any piece of hobby stuff that will increase prices in 5 years. That doesn't cost you any money, really. When you sell your collection in 5 years' time, you're pretty much 99% sure that you will make money out of it.
What's the best
Yeah, what's the
purchase
best?
you ever made?
That was the $500 Submariner I had.
Amazing.
I picked up it, yeah. So I got 100,000. I'm not selling it. If I sell it, I'll sell my whole collection. My trophy. So yeah.
But Michael, this also, because you're an engineer by training and by trade. But maybe one thing that people don't know about you, and if it's okay if I mention it, you also own one of the most famous watch restoration and repair businesses in the world for Rolex classic watch repair, right?
Repair, yeah. So basically, it's out of my own necessity because I've accumulated so many vintage watches. Nobody's there to fix it for me. Now, even Rolex service centers are not fixing really old Rolexes. So what do you do with them? So I started tinkering with them. I partnered with my current partner at the shop. He's a second generation watchmaker. And we started to look at it, how to fix watches. Okay, most people, service the movement. But then you have problems with the straps, with the bracelets, because they can become loose over the years. And I hate old loose straps. So what can you do? I started fixing them for my own use. Wow. So that is a technique. It's a very private thing. I was just doing things for myself. I have dials which are scratch, and I hate scratch dials. So I started to find ways to fix it, to blend in the paint. I needed to relume things. I'm missing a watch hand, which Rolex never supplies. You can't buy from eBay. What do? I start making them. Right, so I go to the suppliers, but they say, "Oh, Michael, you need 300 pieces before I can start production." I said, "Okay, because I need that one. I really wanted it, so I ordered 300 pieces." Right. So what do you do with the 299 pieces? Okay, I put it on my website, start selling it to my friends. So that's how it got me started. Really, it wasn't for the money. It was really a shop to service my own collection. Right. And then I developed a lot of techniques to restore them. And then I offer it to other people. I started lately to redial the loom with real radium. So I was taking some old hands to take off the radium and put them back into my dial. So everything it's out of my own curiosity. So that's fun. For me, working with my hands, it's always good fun. So the business naturally it came out from my hobby of liking vintage watches.
So how did you transition from being this very well-known watch restoration expert to creating your own brand, and why specifically a brand that was such an
I think that I can tell you, I never wanted to create a watch brand because I've seen too many watch brands come and go, and I hate it. I don't want my brand to collapse. So I never really wanted it. But actually, by coincidence, because I was doing these Rolex restorations, I'm kind of a little bit known in that circle. And a few companies were propping out like 10 years ago, making conversions on Rolexes, making blackened Rolexes, and selling for double, triple the prices. And naturally, they were searching on the internet. They searched me to be a supplier to make these custom conversions. So I was naturally chosen by these top two companies. You probably know them, but I prefer not to mention any names. But I was actually the supplier to make, customized parts, all the techniques, even packaging for some of these companies. So I was actually doing it. So that was actually what sparked UNDONE. It's actually during a beer with my current partner now that I say, I was actually supplying this UK company with this blackened Rolex, which they sell for 3 times the list price. I said, wow, yeah, great. But what he asked next was the interesting part. How much are you making out of it? It's probably a couple $100. Yeah, you're making a couple hundred out of the tens of thousands that they're making out of each watch. So that's not really real good business. So that kind of popped up because all the techniques, all the suppliers that are used for these kind of conversions can actually make a new watch. So the idea popped up is, why can't we do a watch brand that can put in all the techniques that I've learned from doing these Rolex conversions and to make it into our own watch brand. And the idea was, purely having a watch brand, it's not going to win anything. I think people nowadays want their own custom-made things, because traditionally in every craft, but even shoemaking, they were all individually made for you. Like suits, they were all individually tailored. Yeah, it was bespoke. So we want to bring in that pedigree back into the old watch industry, because nobody makes custom watches anymore. But because nowadays it's kind of like in traditional stores, it's impossible to do custom made, because you will need an interview with the customer and they spend 3-4 hours just to talk about what they want to build, right? So that's not commercially feasible. But now with internet, we can turn this all around. We can allow customers to have this full customization journey through our internet website customizer. They can select the styles they want. They can do all the color changes. They can even upload their images on their case back, so they can print a photo of their loved ones. So this is a very important point, because a lot of people, when they talk about watches, they talk about how much is the watch? How much is your watch worth? But I can tell you, our Undone customers are very different. One of them told me, Michael, during the listing of my company on the stock exchange, I actually took off my AP watch to wear one of your Undone watches. You know why? He said, because your Undone watch has a photo of my daughter. I want her to be part of my journey on the listing of my company. And here you go. People are taking like $20,000, $30,000 watch off because of my $300 watch, right?
Yeah, but I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I think that we're shifting away from a period where, of course, on some level, there's many brands and they are making watches that everyone wants to have. But exactly. I think that we're also seeing a lot of consumers now wanting precisely what you said, a beautiful object that is a reflection of their own personality, right? Exactly. There's never been a bigger, I've got another magazine called The Rake, and there's never been a bigger renaissance for bespoke tailoring, bespoke shoemaking, bespoke shirt making, simply because the previous generation was a generation about uniformity. This generation is a generation about individuality, right? And I think that's wonderful that you're able to create a watch that is a reflection of your personal taste, and then even have an image of a loved one or a symbol that's important to you, which I know you customize for your back of your watch. That's great. Tell me why it was important for you to position your watch at an affordable price point.
I think because I see the world has changed a lot. Luxury used to be made in limited numbers, okay? Used to be all the big brands, you have to wait for many years to queue up to get the product, because they were all handmade. They were very good. I would say quality is still nice, but they were now mass produced, right? Quality doesn't mean limited, special. It just means high price. I wanted to create something first, not because of price. It's limited. It's limited in certain ways. So if you're custom making it, it's just 1-to-1. Second, I want to make it accessible. I don't like very inflated prices. I think things are getting very out of reach. All the luxury items people are chasing for, it's really out of reach for most people. I like to share. I'm not saying I'm not making any money, but I don't need excessive amounts of money to survive. So I want to share the products. I collect expensive watches as well, but I want to make something that is an alternative to these watches, but yet also fun. You know, I like to make things fun.
I totally agree with that. I think that, that's so important also. I think one of the greatest issues that we have today is the growing disparity between
Mhm.
the ultra rich and the average person. And I think,
Yes.
you live in a city that is a very strong symbol of that as well, which is
Hmm.
probably one of the reasons why people are also a bit irritated also beyond
Right.
all the other political factors, right?
Right.
And I think that the idea of allowing someone the access to something super cool at a price that is accessible, not accessible by a super rich guy, but by the average person, is really
Hmm.
important because you give them happiness, you give them dignity, and you give them the ability to feel respected, and to have a product, or and this specifically a watch that is
Hmm.
by any standards a great watch, great looking watch, and a well-made watch as well,
Yep.
where they don't have to, like mortgage their house, or if they
Exactly.
have a house, or sell their soul just to make that
Hmm.
dream come true, first of all. And second of all, we're always talking about how do we engage the next generation in watches,
Hmm.
right? And you've heard various different people say, well, thank God for the Apple Watch because at least now they have some kind of watch. That's
Yes.
great. But the best way for me to engage the new generation is to make great looking, super cool, very accessibly priced watches that even a young person can afford. Because let me tell you, when we start saying, oh, an accessible price watch is about $5,000, that's crazy. $5,000
Yes.
is a ton of money.
Yes. A lot of people, it's a lot of money. Yes. So what I'm saying now, it's because of the iPhone. Basically, it's a circle. Remember, we used to have pocket watches. Then we have wrist watches. Now that the circle is turned, now we're back to pocket watches because everyone have these pocket watches. You don't need a wristwatch to tell accurate time. This is the most accurate time in the world. It's the internet time, right?
You're right.
So these little things now becomes an accessory. You don't have to wear it. You don't have to wear it to tell time. You choose to wear it. So when you choose to wear something, that means it has to be cool. It has to be fun. It has to make you wear it. It's not like in the traditional old days, you will wear your grandfather old so-called Timex, have no function, no design, but you need to wear it. You need to tell time, right?
Yeah.
But nowadays you need people to wear it, so you have to make them interested. And I think that's where the market changed.
That's
And
amazing.
that's where a lot of different brands didn't realize people don't need watches.
No, it
You
has to
have
be.
to, yeah,
You have to overcome the rationale, idea of I have to take this amount of money and spend it on that instrument by
yes,
making something so engaging and
right,
so charming and so beautiful that people are like, okay, I don't care, right?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly, exactly. So you either build up a very super cool luxury brand that
Yeah,
people aspire to. They will spend 6 months of their salary to buy your product.
right.
That's exploration, right? The other way is to make them say, cool, I like to wear it as to show my character, to show who I am, right? So I can take off a watch, tell people about how I came about designing it, how it has a photo, either it's a photo of your loved ones, it may be a photo of your pet, or any other thing, or a message on it. So it could
Amazing.
be a message from father to son, from friends, relatives, whatever. So it's a talking piece. So you can take it off without saying how much it is, right?
Right.
It's just like, those heirloom stuff. When my grandfather passed me down this $30 watch, I have a repair business. I often repair watches, which is worth only $30. But
Right.
yet people are spending like $500-600. I need this to work because that is given by my grandfather, or that's the only piece I have from my grandfather.
Wow. I love that.
I kind of like built in this character into our watch brand. So
Phenomenal.
every Undone has the logo actually printed at the 6 o'clock place where Swiss made is.
Right.
Right. We are simply the manufacturer of this watch for you.
Right.
We are not your brand. The brand is yours. It's
Yes.
yours to design.
Yes.
So we place ourselves very low in that sense. We're not selling you an Undone. We're selling you a good design for you.
Yes. It's basically you get to create your brand and your design, and Undone is the
Exactly.
vehicle that allows you to do that. No, that's cool.
We're just the enabler. So we just put our logo where it should be.
Okay, but what I
Whoever's
like
buying.
is you've also made some very cool platforms for people to express themselves. So maybe let's look at some of the designs that you do.
Yep.
So maybe the first one we'll pull up is the Urban, specifically the Type 20 configuration of the chronograph. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me a little bit about this, because I know that you are a vintage chronograph. Maybe we'll do the Type 20 Classic.
Okay.
You're a fan of vintage watches and of vintage chronographs. What I
Yep.
like about this is it takes codes from certain parts of history.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly from the French military watches from the sort of the mid 20th century, but I would
Yep.
even say in terms of the crown, even some
Yep.
German watches that were from like the late 30s and early 40s. It's kind
Right.
of a beautiful amalgamation of a lot of different codes, but when you look at it, it's cool. And at the same time, it's got its own unique identity. Like, for example, that bezel,
Mm-hmm.
there's plenty of watches that have that kind of thin rotating fluted bezel,
Right.
including the Hanhart 417, including the Type 20. But you've
Yep.
done it in a way that's a little bit smoother and a little bit more clean and modern looking as well, a little bit more minimalistic. So tell me about your design ethos.
Right. It's a unidirection bezel. It doesn't have flakes. Makes it very smooth. Basically, the design is to make it very true to the original Type 20 design. Very clean aviator watch. The question a lot of people ask me is, why don't you put a mechanical movement into the watch where the original Type 20 was using?
Yeah.
My answer is I cannot find a good quality mechanical movement for that price. I could
Yes.
only go to a Swiss movement, which will make the price to be at least 5 times. And I
Right.
doubt, you really want to buy a watch 5 times for this. So I went to the second best. I went to the Seiko catalog and to get this hybrid movement. So basically, this is a half mechanical and half quartz movement. So the basic timing, the seconds hand timing is done by quartz, but actually the timing part, the chrono part, it's all mechanical. So when you press the chrono button and then when you reset it, you can actually feel that it's a mechanical spring that springs the big second hand back to 12. Whereas in most quartz movement, it will slowly turn back to 12. And that's not normal. So with all mechanical chronographs, it springs back to 12. And this is exactly how this movement does the reset. And also a specific function on a Type 20, it has what they call a flyback function. Why the flyback? They need to quickly reset the button. Like a normal chronograph, you have to start and stop on the first button, on the top button. Whereas in a flyback, you can quickly reset on the bottom button without stopping it. So you can start the chronograph on the top button, and then you can reset to 12 anytime on the bottom button at 4 o'clock. And this is that's the closest quartz mechanical movement that we can find that is true to the Type 20 watch. And since this watch doesn't have a moving seconds hand, in fact, aesthetically, it performs pretty much like a mechanical watch because you don't see any jumping little seconds hand running like a quartz. So it performs to a collector that feels very mechanical to me because you don't see I hate the jumping seconds.
Yes. Okay. So what I think is really cool here. So a mecha quartz is essentially a fundamental base caliber is a quartz caliber. And then on top of that, you've got kind of a mechanical chronograph system here. So let me just check with you. So the subdials that we have on the left and the right, those are, is that minute counter and 24-hour counter?
Correct. So there's no seconds counter. Yeah.
So what's great about that is by eliminating the continuous seconds, you never see the ticking forward. And in addition to that, you have, which probably works in particular for aviation and so on. Remember also Type 20s came in 2 dials, but also 3 dial configurations, also with hour counter too. So I love the fact that you've got a 60-minute counter and a 24-hour counter on this dial. And the only, and I'm totally agree with you. Like my favorite function on a chronograph, I've got my old Roger Dubuis with the Le Mans 2310, and it's the reset on the, that I love, that spring when the reset hammers hit the hard cams and it jumps back.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I want to just talk to you a little bit about this image also, because when you look at this, what you are kind of like blown away by is the quality of work on the finishing of the case. Because
Mm-hmm.
here you have, circular brushing on the bezel, and then on the
Mm-hmm.
case band, you've got vertical brushing. But then
Yeah.
you've got on the lugs, they're faceted and beveled,
Mm-hmm.
and you've
Mm-hmm.
got polishing on multiple surfaces, which are all sharp. I
Yep.
mean, this is an expensive case, right?
It is. I mean, I can easily sell it for double, triple the price. It's true, very true to the original design. I think a lot of people don't realize it, but our crystal is actually a very domed box crystal. It is not flat. Most of the watches selling for this price are flat crystals because they're very cheap. I can tell you, I spent a lot of money on that crystal. It's almost like the cost of my whole case. But that's where people won't spend the money on.
I was going to ask you that as well. So that's not acrylic. That's actually dome sapphire crystal. That's
It's not
incredible.
sapphire, it's K1 hardened glass, but it's actually the box type, which
So it's box
early,
type P1 hardened glass. Okay.
yes. So early days, they use acrylic crystals with this shape, but
Yeah.
since when they moved to glass and sapphire, because of cost issues, they make it flat.
Okay.
So this
Wow.
is a very true to vintage. If I put it on a table amongst other vintage watches that you may have, it will just look naturally part of them, part of the collection. Yeah.
Now
So that's
let's
the fun
transition
part.
from that to one of the watches that like kind of took over social media,
Mm-hmm.
which was your collaboration with Simple Union,
Yeah.
the bronze base camp California dial diving watch. I have a
Yeah.
friend named Ralph out in
Yeah.
Holland, who's a
Yeah.
very cool dude, and he's a partner in this cool brand called Holton Rich Watches, and he took his
Yeah.
and went diving and got it all green and corroded. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell us
Yeah.
about how that came about.
I think it's our first trial into the bronze case. I mean, it's interesting because every watch will develop its own character over time, so to say, but it's no one patina will be the same. And I think everyone is looking for individualistic characters on all the products they buy. And the second thing is the collaboration with Simple Union, where they use old vintage Japanese fabrics, which is actually another craze. There's a lot of people using these what we so-called recycled products, to make it
Yes.
into new products. So we are asking them to help us with the straps to put, vintage Japanese denim straps on it. And naturally, they match really well. Those two characters, the vintage fabric and the aged case. And then we kind of went to the dial designs and say, what can we do to a California dial? It started off as a California dial, and I said, well, let's add some Asian influence in it. So we kind of add in some Chinese design, Chinese philosophies into the dial. So it's a very Zen type of words. So you can read on our website what all that means. And also on the style of wabi sabi, it's basically with a lot of the Japanese ceramics, when it cracks, usually it becomes a piece of rubbish. So they kind of repair it, but instead of seeing just a crack, they decorate the crack. And that's the beauty of this. It blends in a lot of vintage elements, a lot of Asian elements into the watch. And we are not shy to show our Asian heritage.
I
And
love
this
it,
is
man.
how we came to this. I think it sold out in pretty much no time because
It's
of the
fantastic.
limited availability of the fabric. We can't make them in huge quantities.
But the message of that watch was wonderful as well. I mean, and it was so clever to match bronze, which patinas in an individual way, with this
Yeah,
concept of a California or half like California dial, where the top part, instead of having Arabic indexes as you would normally have, you would have Asian indexes, and then
yeah,
to put Kraken, which is where like something that has cracked and has been repaired is considered to be more noble than even a
right.
new object. I think
Yes.
that's all those things came together. As you say, the confluence
Mhm,
was wonderful.
mhm.
Oh, bravo, man. I love what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. So tell me, like, how does it work with Undone? Can people buy already just a preconceptualized model, or can they go and create their own watch on your configurator?
Right. We still allow customization on our website, but we tend to have a smaller focus on it nowadays, because we find that people need us to lead them in the direction of a nice watch. A lot of people, they need to see it. So we now tend to have more styles to actually encourage more your thoughts. So now basically we allow us, we put a lot of designs on the website, but every watch is still kind of customizable. You can still change the colors of the hands and the straps to make your customization. And that's our new direction. Because previously people were just complaining to me, Michael, I like your watches, I like how things are customized, but I'm spending like 6 hours on the website and still can't make up my mind. Can you help me make up my mind? I said, it's very difficult. So now the new way, we give you some ideas what a nice watch is. And then if you say, oh, I don't like this hand in white, I don't like this watch strap, then you can change it. And I think now that satisfies at least 80–90% of the people. I think a lot of times, even if you just simply change the strap, where, in the market, 90% of watches sold just come with one black strap. Even changing a strap is a big thing for most brands.
Yes.
So that's I think where people are used to it. I think, maybe down a little bit later down the game, people might ask for a full customizer in the future, but I think at this moment, this is the best way to present our collection.
Michael, that's awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Thanks so much.
We really dig the Type 20 that we're selling on the website. And I know we have a new version of it coming soon as well with a very cool dial. So thank you for that too. And it was a pleasure talking to you, brother. So thank you, man.
Thank you so much.